Trailer Rewind, a monthly conversation about movies you may have missed in theaters that are now available to watch at home on streaming services. Every month we dig into the archives and watch a film that was one of the trailer picks on a Saturday matinee episode. You can get access to the SatMat shows over at patreon.com, The Next Reel. It's a great way to get an overview of everything we do here at The Next Reel. Today, we're going to be talking about Woman Walks Ahead. This was Andy's pick from April 28th, 2018, and today is October 8th, 2019, and Woman Walks Ahead is available on Amazon Prime, Canopy, and Hoopla, so no reason why you can't get out there and find a way to watch it.
Which one did you watch on?
I think I did Hoopla.
Oh, I haven't even tried Hoopla yet. I did Amazon Prime, so I got lucky.
Okay.
It said that it was going to charge like 99 cents. So I think that even if you don't have a Prime membership, it's relatively inexpensive to watch this movie. So Amazon might be a good option for people if they don't have any of the other options.
Yeah, Canopy and Hoopla are going to both depend on your public library system that you have access to. So depending on if they are a partner or they have subscribed to Hoopla or Canopy, but it's free. They do both have a certain number of credits, so you can only watch a certain number of movies. I think it's like 15, but between the two of them, it's like 30 movies. It's, one a day. I'm not going to get through all of those, but a lot of great content available on those services. Free. You don't even have to pay for like Netflix or Hulu. It's free. Just go get your library card and you've got free movies. A whole month of movies free.
Love it.
Every month. Go get your library card. It's our public service announcement for literacy.
Yes, very good.
In the digital age.
Forgive me, ma'am, but very few unaccompanied ladies travel beyond no more.
Then they are missing some rare beauty.
You're not a soldier's wife.
No, I'm a painter.
A fair?
Yes.
And darling, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but you do have that certain look.
What look is that?
Look at someone filled with good intentions. Western Missouri can be lethal. She came all the way from New York to paint Indians.
I'm going to paint the great Sioux Chief Sitting Bull.
Is that a fact?
I have traveled many miles from the east, across many rivers and hills, for the honor of speaking with you.
You got a train from New York, right?
Yes.
Nice.
This has a very interesting sort of release situation. So Woman Walks Ahead was released into theaters on June 29th, 2018 in two theaters.
Two. Okay.
By the time it closed, it was in theaters for 6 weeks.
Okay.
And it moved from 2 theaters to 6 theaters with a total domestic gross of $57,528.
Whoa. Okay.
Pulled another $20,000 internationally.
Okay.
So in theaters for a total of 6 weeks.
Super small.
It left theaters on August 9th, but it was available digitally streaming on June 26th. So it was sort of one of those day and date release things. And Blu-rays hit shelves on August 28th. So it was basically out there in the summer of 2018 if you were looking for it.
So wait, so it was streaming on June 26th of that same year?
Yes.
Weird. This is kind of the first one that we've done this way, right? Where it's all at the same time?
Yeah, typically we've had some where it's like a quick turnaround, but this is, I think, the first one where it's like
simultaneous
in theaters and digitally at the same time.
Sure.
And I'm assuming the 2 to 6 theater release was the minimum, maybe to qualify for awards consideration if they were considering that. I mean, with the cast that you have, recognizable faces, Jessica Chastain, Sam Rockwell, recognizable faces, possibly, there's, an opportunity for an award out there, maybe, who knows? But I know that's the tricky balance that's happening now with these, hitting things theatrically. Netflix is pushing into that. There's been lots of discussion about their latest, Scorsese, production there, The Irishman, which is a Netflix film. It's going to be in theaters for a very brief time, and then it's going to be on Netflix.
Got it.
And
yeah,
now
they have to
there's
manage
a lot,
much more than they used to have with all these different channels.
Well, and it creates this sort of sense of urgency to get out in theaters to see it, because if you want to see the latest Scorsese film on the big screen, you've got to get out and see it right away. You can't be waiting around like, oh, it'll come out. If it gets nominated, it's going to be in theaters again, or they'll bring it back. No, you've got that one opportunity, which creates some high demand, and depending on how many theaters they actually put it in. It's an opportunity. You may miss this in the theaters, or you may not be able to get a ticket if it sells out in showing after showing, particularly in some of the bigger cities like LA and New York.
Right.
Tight window. So very interesting model.
Yeah. Makes sense. Kind of difficult.
If you recall from last month when we talked about Leave No Trace, which was also the trailer pick from April 28th, 2018, that was Pete's pick. This is Andy's pick. So we hit some gold there. They both had some films that they picked as trailers that were intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
Why Andy picked this trailer was that he heard about this from a friend that worked on it. Now, he didn't say who that was, but he also said that he loves these Old West stories about the plight of Native Americans, and that he just thinks there's a lot of meat in those stories. Pete agreed, but said he was pretty much just charmed by this trailer, and mentioned the scene in the trailer where Catherine is trying to explain to Sitting Bull how she traveled from far away to see him, using lots of nature imagery, like I came over many hills and crossed many rivers. And he responds, "You got a train from New York, right?" And like perfect, casual conversational English. And it's that moment that just, warmed Pete's heart. He was charmed by that moment.
Love it.
In the trailer. So that's why we're going to be talking about Woman Walks Ahead today.
Got it. But
my first question to you, JJ, is: do you consider this film a Western?
Not at all. Not even close.
It's in the Dakotas. You've got Sitting Bull. You've got the American Army out there. You're in the 1890s.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's
I feel
ripe
like
for being a Western, right?
Yeah, but just the setting doesn't make it that. I feel like the Western genre in and of itself is something about a certain film. I don't.
Okay.
This is based enough on history that it doesn't feel like the Western genre to me, because I really think of Western as a story that's put out. I'm trying to think of another true to life sort of thing, or based on true movie that I would consider a Western. I don't know that I would.
So like Tombstone, something like that.
Well,
Wyatt Earp, are those Westerns?
That's good things to suggest, because
okay.
I've been, now you being in Arizona, I assume you've been to the OK Corral.
Yes.
So I have many times too. I had a small time in my life when I was a youth living in Tucson. So have spent some time at the OK Corral. And I feel like that story is sensationalized a little bit, right? And in both cases, those movies came out in the same year. Clearly it was, something about Western lore that put that story out there. I feel like this was the purpose behind making this story was something that was more about history and setting something straight, rather than the sort of sensationalized or the romanticized idea of what Western was. I think, you bring up, we did Hostiles on this show, and,
yes.
I don't even know that I would consider, you got Hostiles a Western, because again, it's meant to be a certain point about the end of the West, right? And I think that's what this movie is too. So I think, and this is very different than Hostiles for sure, but they're making similar points in the way that integration happened towards the end of really, the white man coming across the land and taking it all from Native peoples. So I think it's interesting like that, but I wouldn't call it a Western. And actually, looking at Hostiles, they don't call Hostiles Western either. They call it a period film. So maybe that's what I would call this. It's a period film.
It's a period film. Okay, well, that for people that have a high interest in Western and don't want them to think that this is Western, or people that do not enjoy Westerns, to let them know that this is not a Western. So a little bit, something to not be a barrier to embracing this film just because of its setting. It's not a Western.
Right.
So that gets to the point of, as you talked about, what this story is trying to do. And what's very interesting is that Standing Rock Reservation, where Catherine visits, this is the same reservation that people may recall from the news during the whole pipeline standoff. So given the timing of production and release of this film, which was, 2018, we had the protest was, like 2016, 2017. So is this film, do you feel that it was commenting on that issue, Or do you think that this is a story that stands apart and alone on itself?
Well, I didn't know that leading up to this, so you're giving me new information there with that little bit. But I think that it could be. But I have 2 points to maybe make about that, and I think that this portrait that really is the central sort of purpose to Catherine's journey to the West, to paint Sitting Bull. I think it's a relatively famous portrait. It hangs in a museum. I think that I would say initially my approach to this story was it was meant to tell the story of how this came about, because it is an interesting story. The other piece is that, and you may know more about this than I do, in terms of the production company, in terms of A24, thinking about what A24 does and the way that they make movies and the way that they sort of home grow things, I think that it is possible that it was made with a statement in mind. Do you know more about A24 and the reason why those movies get made and how they get made? Because that would maybe lend itself to saying there is a time for us to tell this story, and Standing Rock might be that time.
I do not have any insight into the production selection process, if it is selecting a film based on that there's a larger message or something behind it. I think that they do select certain stories, but I think for me it's more of an A24 film because it focuses on the relationship between Catherine and Sitting Bull. And for me, that's, I think, the story that's there of two people that are really sort of on the fringe of society, because Catherine is a widow. She says she's of a certain age. I think in real life, I think she was in her late 40s, early 50s, I think, when she made this journey out to paint Sitting Bull. But, she tells a story about, that she was basically passed from her father to her husband. She did not have a life of her own. This is her chance to be free now that she's a widow and do something that she is interested in. And the film starts off with her on her journey out west to the Dakotas, determined to paint Sitting Bull. We get some voiceover narration of a letter that she is writing to Sitting Bull, explaining that she was inspired after seeing the paintings of George Catlin, who was one of the first painters to portray the Plains Indians in their native territory, but she saw that there was no portrait of Sitting Bull, and so she has decided that needs to be remedied, and she is the one that is going to take care of that. So we get a little bit of her mindset going out there. A little more is revealed in her conversations with Sitting Bull. We learn a little bit about her past, the type of woman, the type of child she was, in her story about why she does not like being around horses, an incident with her father, and punishment for basically being a defiant child. So we get that sense of her personality, which I think is important to the story as we get to the critical point in our story, which has to do with this whole rationing and this vote that's going on.
Yeah.
But we've got her as
the
as
allocation
a woman
treaty. I think that's the historical piece.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So we've got Catherine, who's pretty much an outsider. She, comes out there. When people hear there's a painter, they assume it's a man. To find out it's this woman. She's also a widow. She is not someone that people expect to be out there. Women do not travel out past, Omaha. We hear early on.
Right.
But then we also have Sitting Bull, who is in an interesting point in his life, because his authority and leadership is being questioned, because rather than fighting, he's farming. Now it's after, the whole Custer issue.
Right. There is a reservation.
There's a reservation.
Yep.
And so there's the whole ghost dance movement that's going on at this point, where there's this sort of insurgency coming about of trying to bring about some change. And he does not embrace that. And there's, a lot of people leave when he's off with Catherine. They're, setting up that first time where she's going to paint him. And as they're gone for that day, some, information about the allocation treaty comes in. Everybody's wondering where Sitting Bull is. He's off with the white woman that many people suspect is a spy for the military. So his power is questioned. So both of them are sort of on the outside of their culture and society. And to me, that's the interesting aspect of this film. That's the story that I think is trying to be told of how these two bonded, why they connected, and sort of how they collaborated in this whole, sort of vote with the allocation treaty.
Did you buy their bonding?
This is one of the struggles with this movie. I was entertained by it.
Sure.
Director Susanna White has done a lot of TV.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's that aspect of it that it felt it hit all the points. It moved along the story, the performance. I think Jessica Chastain's doing a little bit of a New York accent.
Is it New York? That accent. Okay.
Or
I'm a huge Jessica Chastain fan. But that accent was ridiculous. It was half New York,
right?
Half something mid-Atlantic, something New Englander mixed with something, some sort of Southie mixed with something out of, the south of Ireland too. I don't know. It was very confusing and distracting, which is really unfortunate. I almost wish she just wouldn't have tried any of them and just let it go, because it was, I couldn't place her. I couldn't figure out where she was.
Well, and then Catherine Weldon was, I think, Swedish. So I don't know
Swedish, really? Wow.
What point her family came to the States. I'm not an expert on her biography. She's so she was born in Switzerland, 1844. So Swiss, New York, and we get this sort of hybrid accent.
Maybe she did that on purpose then, but for a viewer where you're not going to know that stuff, it just feels, and it almost, and of course I'm reading too much into it, but I'm watching her perform, and now I've become this hyper Jessica Chastain fan. So I'm like totally just enwrapped, just watching her the entire time. Mm-hmm. And it just looks like she's uncomfortable with it too. And, in her scenes with Sam Rockwell, who we get introduced to later as this kind of as an interesting, anti-hero kind of weird support, but anti-support thing. He is, of course, just playing a very comfortable Sam Rockwell role. And for her to play this thing that feels really stilted and uncomfortable next to him, it just really, it was difficult to watch. And that's why maybe, my initial question was, did you buy that Sitting Bull and Catherine Weldon were bonded? And I just never caught the moment where they got that, other than time. And time might be enough, or maybe empathy, because there was enough empathy shown, but there wasn't enough of a turn at any point for me to believe that they became close. And that's hard with this story. I think that was necessary.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces where I see everything and it just isn't clicking together the way I want it to.
Sure.
I didn't get emotionally invested in the relationship between them. At one point, she goes into town because the ration has hit, and she's got her. So I guess we got to back up a little bit. When she approaches Sitting Bull about painting his portrait, he asks how much, and she says, "Oh, well, I typically charge people $40, but he says, no, how much are you going to pay me?" And he negotiates a deal where she's going to pay him $1,000 for the opportunity to paint him.
Yep.
She gets the money. What ends up happening with that money is once the rations hit, he gives her that money to go into town to buy supplies for the tribe.
Right.
When she's in town, it's a brutal scene where she just gets beat badly, and is even warned by one of the women in town, you need to get out of here. They're looking for a rope.
Yeah.
So but as we learn later on, there in the paper, there's an article suggesting there's some type of romantic, relationship between Catherine and Sitting Bull. And we don't get that. We get some attempts at some sort of uncomfortableness of, him changing. It's just her and him. Is there some sexual tension there? I don't buy that.
Hollywood sure wants us to think there is.
Right. But for me, I think the relationship that I was looking for was, again, these two outsiders bonding to fight back against the white men that are pushing them and basically disenfranchising them, disempowering them.
Yes.
And we get a little bit of that, but not enough. And it's not like we need the meet cute from a romantic comedy for this relationship, but we need something more than that. And so I agree. It's not quite there. There's a lot of pieces in this. You know, you mentioned Sam Rockwell sort of doing the Sam Rockwell thing as well. And he's playing a role where you think, oh, it's Sam Rockwell. He's not being nice. Okay, it's the mean Sam Rockwell character where he's a despicable person. But we have near the end, there's an attempt to sort of redeem his character because he finds that, after the whole vote, sort of blows up and goes, the wrong way due to Sitting Bull giving this great speech, Graves, Sam Rockwell's character, comes in to say, hey, look, they're coming to arrest you in the morning.
Right.
And Sitting Bull's like, look, I remember your face. It was up in these mountains and half the, women and children surrendered and you guys just slaughtered them. And he basically says, well, he's trying to make amends for that.
Yeah.
And I really struggled with that because I was trying to figure out what's his motivation for that. Why is there enough guilt? Because from the onset, he's played as he's all about the military, trying to get this thing in. We're going to starve them out so that they vote for this. His whole goal is to get this allocation treaty signed. But when the general shows up and things go wrong, he seems to switch sides and say, well, look, no, it's in their best interest to sign this allocation treaty because if they don't, the army's going to show up and it's going to be a slaughter. And that's what they want. That's what the army wants. They want to come out here and they want to just wipe them out.
Well, and that piece of political intrigue was... with each of them switching roles, right? We get Sam Rockwell, who through most of the beginning of the movie we think is a bad guy towards the cause. Yeah. And then we get the general who portrays himself as positive to their cause. But then when we finally get the turn and we notice that, Sam Rockwell was trying to do some tough love through politics, whereas the general is really just hoping that they fight back so that he can kill them all. That's a really interesting sort of political statement to the story, but it's somewhat buried because it just happens towards the end. I think that was one of the most positive things about the story in this movie was how they portrayed each of these characters. But again, I didn't necessarily buy their turn. The moment you're talking about when Sam Rockwell says he's trying to sleep, I haven't slept well since I did that. I didn't buy it, right? I didn't believe him, but the story was great. Now knowing that is true, I love that aspect of the story. I just didn't buy it because I was so sold on the red herrings of these characters earlier in the story.
Spoiler alert. Sitting Bull gets shot, and it wasn't really clear to me who it was. Now I read up on it. It's okay. So it was one of the police force, that there's a Native American police officer or out of the police force and all of that. And I got that, but we didn't get that scene of setting that up. I mean, yes, historically it happens. But what was the motive behind that? They're coming to arrest him, but they're going to use that as the setup to assassinate him. And I at that point, I felt like this is the movie that gets made for like high school history classes where you've been studying this. And it's like, now we're going to watch this. And this is a fairly accurate portrayal of these things that we've been reading about.
That's definitely how it felt. Yep.
And because as not being a history buff of this era, I just didn't have a lot of the information. And given that it's a biopic, I'm assuming that a lot of this is based on actual events, diaries, journals, letters, all of those things. And I know some things have to be dramatized. And I'm
the post log. The horse danced, and then the post log tells us that the horse did dance. Which this is the stuff that you would think would be fabricated, but I think that's the point that I think you're trying to make when you compare this to something you'd see in a high school history class, because that's what we would see. And then we would learn that anecdotally, that's what we believed happened and what led to the Sioux fleeing was within when they saw the horse dance after he's shot, like these kind of pieces. So, but in general, I wanted that to be more dramatic, more emotional, more Hollywooded. And that was really very sterile.
It was. And I love it's like the horse is dancing, and it's like a little bit of slow motion. I think is it slowed down a little bit, kind of. But it's everything's built together to the point where she has, she's there with. I mean, this is the final conversation where, Graves is telling, Sitting Bull, they're coming to get you and all of that. And then he leaves, and then Catherine leaves, and then is immediately like abducted and thrown on a horse. And it's Sam Rockwell, it's Graves. And they ride off until they get off the reservation. And he's like, look, you're free. You're off the reservation. You're free to go.
Yep.
All that. And she runs back, and it's, early hours of the morning. So she's still in the woods. She hears the gunshot. All of that, I thought, should have been such a powerfully emotional moment. And then with the horse, because we get the setup early on of he got this horse from Wild Bill, and the horse is a trick horse. When he hears a gunshot, he starts dancing, and everything came together. And I thought, am I dead inside? I really
you wanted to
like,
feel it more. No, I completely agree with you.
Yes. This is the thing I struggle with, because with this film is I wondered if was I just not in the right mood for this film, but because it seems like everything's there, but it just is lacking something. And I don't know if it's the performances aren't at 100%. It's Michael Gray Eyes, I think, as Sitting Bull. I enjoyed his performance. It wasn't anything stellar, and maybe that's what it needed, was a little bit more something. This is where I struggle with, is it the performances? Is it the editing? Is it how, trimming some things here or there, sequence of events where I'm just not enough on that post-production side to see how these things get put together, to see when it works.
So I definitely have something to say about the editing, because the camera in this movie was really gorgeous, and we compare it to what we did last month, where we did Leave No Trace, and the camera was really gorgeous in Leave No Trace too. But the way that Leave No Trace was edited was done so in a way to sort of give the camera the ability to tell the story. And there were a lot of really creative camera moves in this movie, in A Woman Walks Ahead. I'm reminded especially of when she, very early in her arrival to the West, comes out and is looking. She's treated poorly everywhere she goes. She's treated poorly because it's assumed that she doesn't understand, basically the war that's happened between the natives and the white man through here. And it's illustrated by the point when she goes to the cemetery. And there's some really beautiful motion control shots that are looking at Catherine, center framed in, and then with a pan, but holding her in the center, and then moving along, and these sort of great things where you have the blank backs of crosses of the people who have died in these battles, and then it's interspersed with quick cuts, and then even a couple other moving shots of looking cross by cross and reading "Murdered by the Sioux, murdered by the Sioux, murdered by the Sioux," and all this stuff. So these are some really great sequences that are put together. And this is just one example of a number of really beautifully conceived shots of the camera in this movie. But the editing did not give any room or any time to really experience those shots. It was cut very tightly in a way that made it feel, and you mentioned that the director had worked on TV before. I did not know that. I don't know if it comes from that, but it really felt like TV in the way that we couldn't linger on some of that real beautiful camera work, which it really deserved, because it could have had the sort of grandeur of something like a Dances with Wolves, right? And of course, I'm relating it to another Old West story, but everything we see about epics like that are give it the time, give it the sky, give it the sense of place. And there were those shots in this movie, but the editing didn't allow those shots to tell the story. The story was told through the script. And the script I didn't find terrible by any means, but the fact that the shots were there to tell the story visually, and the editing cut it off, really bothered me. It bothered me multiple times, because there were lots of shots that I wanted to talk about on the show. I'm only referencing the one with the cemetery, but there was lots of great camera work, and because of the editing, it cut it off. And you bring it up in a point to talk about the emotion. That could have been part of it too. I mean, the fact that it's cut so tightly might have sapped us of the emotional bonding that was necessary between these people.
It feels like television. Yeah. And I couldn't place it, because you're outdoors in the Dakotas, and you've got these beautiful shots of, I mean, when you're shooting out there, I have to say, you have to be doing something really wrong to not get beautiful footage out there
Right.
with just, so, okay, that's a given. And you know where to put your camera. You're watching where the sun is. You're getting some great shots.
They did it,
but
they were great shots.
But as you said, it's not visually telling the story. It's relying too much on the words.
Right.
And I think that comes from, and that's where I'll come back to TV, because I think a lot of TV is made in a way that if you're not watching, you can get everything through the dialogue.
Yeah.
And I mean, sure, some innovative shows or some, shows that are pushing the limits of what, television should be.
These days
we'll do some, which is a lot more, but typically, put on anything that's on, network TV that's a hour-long drama, and you could sit there and not actually watch it and know exactly what's going on in the story. And I feel like that's what happened here. There's actors that can communicate performances visually, and I think maybe that's why I'm not feeling the connection, because it just hung on the words so much, and there's only so much you can do. It's, again, always show don't tell. This was more telling than showing, unfortunately. And I so desperately wanted to enjoy this movie much more, because these are the types of films that I really enjoy. Things out in the West, dealing with a piece of history that I'm not as familiar with, but just learning about what was going on in our country.
Right.
And there's, but again, I don't want to say it's too wordy, but there's just something that prevented it from going that little bit extra to really make me fall in love with the characters.
Yeah.
Empathize with their plight and what's going on. And it frustrated me that I didn't enjoy it more, because I thought, I want to love this movie, but you're not letting me love you. What are you doing?
Yeah, I felt the same way.
We talked about performances a little bit. I do want to highlight one actor, Bill Camp, who is the one that actually plays General Crook. He's the one that comes out, when they're going to actually do the vote and all that. So we've talked about him on the next reel 2 other times.
Okay.
He was in Hostiles. The character was Jeremiah Wilkes. I don't know who that was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. He's a character actor. He's a face that blends in someplace. And then he was also in Molly's Game. He played Harlan Eustace. And again, I'd have to go back and watch. If I watched all 3 of these, then I'd be probably like, oh yeah, there he is. There's Bill. There's Bill. There's Bill. Okay.
Yeah.
See, but 2017 was a very busy year for him. Woman Walks Ahead, Molly's Game, Hostiles, and The Only Living Boy in New York, a film that we have not talked about on the next reel anywhere. And I don't think it was a trailer pick. I would have to go back and dig in to see if Pete or Andy picked The Only Living Boy in New York, directed by Mark Webb. But that's, we don't get a lot of, these character actors that are going to show up
multiple times.
And so I guess he's attracted to projects that we think we're going to enjoy watching. So.
Makes sense. We'll have to seek out that Only Living Boy in New York trailer and then seed it into a sat mat so that we can do his complete filmography.
There we go. All right. So you said there was some more camera work you wanted to talk about.
Well, the cemetery is really the one that I fix on. But I mean, there's so many, scene setters in this that, they really do a great job of showing the sky in places. The train sequence when she's coming out, everything outside the window is perfect. And then everything in the window is inside the room where the cabin is pretty terrible. So the fact that they're intercut really bothers me. But the vision that the director of photography or the director herself had, in having her sort of a light to the window and opening the shade and then having it, fill the cabin with color. These are the kind of things. There's a lot of really innovative things done here visually that I just wish there was so much more of. And they had great camera moves. There were some camera moves that were confusing. In other words, I didn't understand the point of why they did it. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I just really feel rewarded when I see that in a film. I just wanted more of it. And I wish the editor would have let it run.
One of the things that I did notice about this, and we do have that one very violent scene when Catherine is beat up in town, but throughout this journey, we are continuously reminded of how brutal and violent it is out here, sort I guess, in the uncivilized West compared to the city that she comes from. Because even on the train, the man that comes in, to fresh linens, all of that, and she notices, oh, you're Native American, and she says, what tribe? And he says Presbyterian.
Right.
And she starts asking him about the Sioux, and he's like, look, they slaughtered my people.
Yeah.
And then we get Sitting Bull, when he shows his painting that he has done, where he's got something for each year of his life. And we see, the first man he killed when he was 13.
Right. It was the major aspect of his life. Yeah.
Right. And that's when he became Sitting Bull. He received that title, became a man, but it was because he killed that man, because if he didn't, that man was going to kill his mother and his sister. And then we've got, here's the death of my father, and here's me killing the man that killed my father. And then there's, Little Bighorn, and just you see people that just violence permeates every aspect of their life. And part of it, I think, is to contrast, Catherine coming out from civilized society. And we hear, from Sam Rockwell on the train, look, but women don't come out past Omaha, but we're continually told over and over again what a violent place this is. And aside from the beating that she receives, and then we get the assassination of Sitting Bull, we don't have that.
Right.
Violence. I guess it's the West that was, and maybe that's to give us a little bit of the background, the backstory of, what it's like out there, why there is so much hostility towards her.
You just have to mix it with Hostiles. All the violence is in Hostiles. So you can take that and put it here.
Because she's, perceived as sympathetic. Well,
right.
Heck, even when she gets off the train and Graves, explains to a man standing there, like, oh, yes, she's here. She's going to go paint Sitting Bull. And he spits on her.
Right.
And
because
he basically
of assumptions, he assumes that she's, a sympathizer, which becomes a reality, but yeah.
Right. But I mean, then he says, yeah, I hope, they rape you and cut the baby out like they did to these, young girls.
Right.
And then, Graves tells his story about the scalping, and these, that's great. And then he saw 2 little blonde scalps in there, it's everything in the past. And perhaps that's to give us maybe create some tension or expected hostility when the general gets out there, and what he's looking for is, this is what this relationship has been like,
right,
between the Sioux and the other tribes, and the U.S. military has just been, violence upon violence upon violence. And which is why when she says, look, we can't fight back, this has to come to a vote, and that's how we're going to fight this, should be, why would Sitting Bull accept this? Because that is not how he operates, right? I mean, we see time after time, for somewhat humorous effect of, just the contrast between how she behaves and what expected roles of women are there, because there's the scene where he's going to explain everything, and she's telling him, well, maybe you should start with this and then talk about this. And he says, well, I can't be seen taking orders from you, so now we're going to have to wait a while.
Right. Yeah.
Of just those disconnects. And so when it comes to we're going to fight this through a vote, I felt like that should have been, I don't know, there should have, again, it just didn't have the emotional resonance of, yes, you're stepping outside of the violence. You're taking a different approach. This is why this should work, because all of the fighting, all of the bloodshed has not fixed this issue. And maybe this is going to be that piece, but it just didn't. It limped along.
Which one of our guys, is it Tommy or is it Pete, hates when they say the name of the movie in the movie? Is that Pete or Tommy? It's one of the two of them. I can't remember, but they really shouldn't see this movie. Pete, I think it's Pete. If you really should not see this movie, because they say it, I think 5 times, and they say it in different languages.
Yes.
So, but that to the point, to your point, that's what you were talking about, right? Like the woman walking ahead. Like you can't have the woman walking ahead. We can be equals. You can't be behind at different points. I mean, they make it a big point. So, if that bothers you, don't see this movie, because they're gonna bring it up a couple of times. So here it comes. Woman walks ahead.
So. if you're expecting a Western, it's not a Western. If
Right.
if you don't like movies where they mention the title of the movie in the actual dialogue, don't see this movie.
Right.
So who is this film for, aside from high school American history classes?
Goodness gracious.
Would you recommend this to anybody?
If there are people who are aficionados of the real history of the West, and people
Okay.
who are people who care about Native American history, I think it's important, and I think learning about it. But I will say, I mean, I was disappointed with the execution of the film. I won't recommend it other than to say it's helping me round out my complete filmography of Jessica Chastain. So maybe that's who I'm going to recommend it to. Have you seen every Jessica Chastain movie? No. Well, try Woman Walks Ahead. So there we go. I had to work my way around to it, but that's who I'm going to recommend it to. And not Sam Rockwell fans, because it's just another Sam Rockwell movie. But Jessica Chastain for sure.
Well, yeah, and I guess that's the thing is I was disappointed by the movie, but it wasn't one that made me angry or I feel was a disaster. It had more potential, but it didn't rise above, TV and realize full cinematic potential. So yeah, if you're a Jessica Chastain fan, even with the accent, you still think even with the accent that...
Well, I think I mean, you need to see that your heroes are human too. So yeah, nothing wrong with that. I mean, I still like her. I just didn't like that darn accent.
Well, we'll see what happens, because coming down the pike in pre-production, she is playing Tammy Wynette.
Oh my goodness!
So we'll see. Oh, and she's also playing Tammy Faye Baker, so she's got two Tammys coming down the road here. So
Tammy's aplenty.
So we'll see how the accents go.
Sounds good.
Given that we can't give it a glowing recommendation, where does that end up putting it? Your flick chart?
Well, I do want to compare it to Hostiles first and foremost, because Hostiles is really low on my flick chart. Hostiles, because it was just a really tough movie for me. Hostiles shows in at like 211 out of a total of 214 movies for me. So that's way at the bottom because I just wasn't able to get anything from it. This movie comes in a much more sort of a relatively common place for trailer rewind movies, which is, and it's right beneath Leave No Trace, which is 152 out of that, again 214, and that's between Leave No Trace and above Don't Think Twice, which I think the sort of concept that you're seeing here in trailer rewind movies, because those are both ones that we've done for this show, is when they're more about sort of the real life story and less about the dramatic sort of Hollywooding of what could be in the story. I need a little bit more push. And I think Leave No Trace is a great film, but it's not something that was powerful enough for me based on its structure. I know you feel differently about that, but Woman Walks Ahead is comparable for me because it has that same emotional, for me, the same kind of emotional depth and the same kind of beautiful camera work, but it still puts in a pretty lower place in my flick chart because I'm not going to really want to see it again.
I liked Hostiles a lot more than you did.
And Leave No Trace as well. So yeah.
And Leave No Trace. So, but this one did sort of fall into sort of a zone of some other trailer rewind films. Not right adjacent, but sort of in the general area, because it ended up at 361, which puts it like at the 21st percentile. So it's down in the bottom 20%, whereas Hostiles is like, I think, up in my top 100.
Oh, wow.
Somewhere.
That's interesting.
Pete's going to be angry. It's just below Cube. Yes, Pete, that's how low Cube is on my list.
I love Cube.
It's entertaining, but I really enjoy it, but I tend to look, when it comes to things that's close, I'm like, which is more artfully done, which has something to say, and Cube has some things to say, but not quite as much as just being a fun little puzzle box of a movie. So it's right around there. But I think our nearest trailer rewind is Experimenter, which is about 10 places above on that one.
Sense.
So it's one that I'm still like disappointed. I wanted this movie to be so enjoyable. And so I'm putting it like at 2 stars on this because I can't give it 3. I would almost want to give it 2.5, but after talking about it more, it's just, this laying flat 2-star movie for me.
Mine's a 2-star and a not like 2.
Okay.
So that's the thing.
Okay.
Like Leave No Trace, they're really close to each other.
Yeah.
Mine was probably very similar, but it was a like for Leave No Trace. For this movie, it's a 2-star and a not like.
That's our discussion for Woman Who Walks Ahead. I don't know where we're going to go next month. We will see. Well, maybe we can get to the Only Living Boy in New York now. Well, I'm going to dig into the archives. I'll see what kind of fun stuff. Maybe since we're getting into the holiday season, we'll see what kind of holiday shenanigans we can find.
Right. I wonder if the streaming services will start sort of timing their releases accordingly with the holidays too. That could be really cool for us to do something like that as well.
Yeah, we'll see what's out there. So, but for our listeners, if you haven't already, please head over to iTunes, give us a rating, review, subscribe, follow, all of those things that helps other film fans discover us online. Yes, iTunes is apparently the thing that controls podcasts for whatever reason. And if you choose to support us on Patreon, you're joining a great community of film fans, some that are into film as art, some that just really enjoy entertaining movies. And there's always great discussions about that. There was heated discussion and debate about Martin Scorsese's statement that the Marvel movies are not cinema, which split some divides of how dare Martin Scorsese say that, to other people saying, yes, I agree, they're not cinema. They're still movies and they're still entertaining, but what he's expecting out of cinema, which has something to do about the human condition and all of these things. So yeah, great just conversations going on. There's all kinds of stuff in there all the time. The community's growing and flourishing, great conversations, people sharing links to short films and things on YouTube and great conversations. So we'd love to have you join in that community. And special thanks to Pete taking time out of his busy schedule to edit our episodes. Without him, we wouldn't be able to bring you Trailer Rewind. So thank you, Pete,
thanks,
for
Doc.
taking this on as a project. Yes, thank you. JJ, it's always a pleasure. Hondo.